More than 100 Russian motorcycles, buggies, and quad bikes moved with tanks and APCs in a large assault meant to put fast pressure on Ukraine's defensive line. But the real shock was not only how many vehicles were sent forward. It was how early Ukraine could read the attack before the heavier armor even reached the trenches. A Russian motorcycle group rushed through a forest road with a clear mission: find the route, test the flank, and open the way for tanks and APCs waiting behind. On the ground, it looked fast, cheap, and flexible. From above, it looked different. Ukrainian FPV teams were already turning that movement into a target map. Once the route was exposed, the whole assault began to lose its cover. Snipers could wait near the right choke point. Artillery could strike the approach area. FPV drones could dive into a tank, an APC, or an infantry group forced to stop in the open. That is what makes this battle different from a normal frontline video. The story is not only about Russian motorcycles being hit. The bigger story is how Ukraine is breaking the way Russia builds an assault, from the first scouting riders to the heavier mechanized force behind them. So what happens when speed, armor, and numbers are all placed under a sky full of FPV drones? Russian motorcycle groups are not just small assault teams. They are often the first signal that a larger attack is being prepared behind them. Before tanks, APCs, and BMPs enter the most dangerous zone, Russia needs to know where the Ukrainian line is weak. A heavy vehicle can bring firepower, armor, and troops, but it also creates a large target. Once it moves on an open road or near a tree line, FPV drones can spot it quickly, and artillery can begin to shape the battlefield before the vehicle reaches its goal. This is why motorcycle teams have become useful for Russian commanders. They can move faster than infantry on foot, and they can pass through narrow routes where armored vehicles may struggle. A small group can rush along a forest road, cross a field track, or move beside a tree line to test whether Ukraine is watching that area. If no fire comes, the route may look safer for the next wave. If Ukraine responds, Russian commanders may learn where the defense is active. But this method carries a serious risk. The motorcycle group is not only scouting the road, it is also revealing the possible direction of the assault. A rider may think speed is protection, but speed creates movement that is easy to follow from above. The faster the group pushes through a narrow route, the clearer its pattern becomes. FPV operators can see where the riders slow down, where they turn, and where the terrain forces them into a line. On the ground, the route may feel covered by trees and broken roads. From the sky, it can look like a marked path leading straight toward the Ukrainian defense. The Russian plan depends on surprise. The motorcycle troops must move quickly enough to reach a useful position before Ukraine can react. They may be looking for a flank, a gap between defensive posts, or a hidden road that can later carry heavier vehicles. Their job is to create a first picture for the force behind them. If they succeed, tanks and APCs can move with more confidence. The problem begins when Ukraine already has the picture first. Once FPV drones detect the motorcycle group, the riders lose the most important part of their mission. They are no longer an unseen scouting force. They become an early warning sign. Their direction tells Ukraine where pressure may come next. Their spacing shows how organized the group is. Their route reveals where heavier vehicles may try to follow. This changes the whole meaning of the movement. A small motorcycle patrol can suddenly expose the shape of a larger assault. What Russia sends forward as a cheap and flexible tool may give Ukraine enough time to prepare the real trap. The weakness is not only the lack of armor, it is the lack of protection against being read. A motorcycle can outrun a soldier, but it cannot outrun a live FPV feed. It can avoid some muddy ground, but it cannot hide if the route is already under watch. It can move through a field faster than an APC, but it cannot protect the rider once sniper teams or artillery know where the group is heading. When the route has been seen from above, Ukraine no longer has to guess the direction of the attack. It only has to choose the best place to wait. Once Ukrainian FPV drones lock onto the motorcycle group from above, speed begins to turn against the riders. The first advantage belongs to the side that sees the route before the fight begins. Ukrainian FPV operators can watch the motorcycles move along the track, measure the distance between each rider, and notice where the group slows down. They can see the small bends in the road, the narrow gaps near the trees, and the places where the riders have no room to spread out. That live picture gives sniper teams time to prepare, instead of reacting in panic. The motorcycle group may still believe it is moving fast enough to avoid danger. The riders may keep their engines high, stay close to the tree line, and push toward the next turn before Ukrainian fire can respond. But the problem is already above them. FPV drones do not need to stop the group at once. They only need to keep the route in view and pass the right picture to the shooters waiting on the ground. This is where the ambush becomes dangerous. A sniper team can choose the edge of a tree line, a higher patch of ground, or a firing angle that cuts across the route. The position is not chosen by luck. It is chosen because the FPV has already shown where the motorcycles must pass, where they cannot turn easily, and where the first hit will create the biggest delay. The opening shot is not just about hitting one rider, it is about breaking the movement of the whole group. If the lead motorcycle loses control, the formation behind it has only seconds to react. One rider slows down, another tries to swing around the wreck. A third turns back toward the tree line, while someone else may abandon the bike and run for cover. The group is still alive, but it no longer moves like a unit. It becomes a set of separate choices made under fear, noise, and confusion. That moment is the real center of the battle. The motorcycle was supposed to give Russia speed, but the first disruption turns that speed into disorder. A fast unit needs rhythm. It needs every rider to know where the others are going. Once the route is blocked and the lead element is hit, the road becomes a trap rather than a path forward. Ukrainian FPV drones keep watching as the group breaks apart. They can see who is trying to regroup, who is crawling toward cover, and which direction the remaining riders may use to escape. This matters because the ambush does not end with the first shot. The fight continues through observation. Each movement gives Ukraine a new clue, and each clue can guide the next sniper shot or the next FPV strike. Russian troops may try to answer with fire, but their response comes late. If they do not know where the sniper is positioned, every burst toward the trees is only a guess. The sound of engines, dust, and shouting makes the scene harder to control. The riders who were sent forward to find Ukraine's weak point are now trying to survive inside a zone already prepared for them. This is why sniper fire has a larger effect than the damage it causes. It destroys timing. It forces Russian riders to react before they understand the battlefield. It takes a mobile scouting force and turns it into exposed targets that Ukraine can track from above. But when this first layer is stopped, Russia often does not end the attack there. Tanks, APCs, and BMPs may still move forward to rescue the situation or keep pressure on the Ukrainian line. When the motorcycle screen is broken, the heavier Russian force enters the fight with a dangerous problem. Tanks, APCs, BMPs, infantry, and support vehicles may still be ready to move, but the route ahead is no longer clean. The first layer that was supposed to test the ground has already been exposed, and the force behind it must advance without knowing how much Ukraine has seen. The goal of this mechanized push is clear. Tanks are expected to bring firepower forward. APCs and BMPs are meant to carry infantry closer to the Ukrainian line, and support vehicles help keep the assault moving. If the route works, Russian troops can reach a tree line, a village edge, or a trench approach before Ukraine has enough time to stop them. That is how a small probe can become a real assault. But the plan starts to weaken when the scouting group has already been hit. The Russian armored vehicles may still follow the same road or field track, yet that path is now under attention. Commanders may not know which bend is watched, which open patch is covered by artillery, or where FPV teams are waiting for the next target. The tanks move with armor, but not with full awareness. As the first vehicles roll forward, Ukrainian FPV drones can begin tracking the shape of the column. They do not need to attack immediately. They can watch the lead tank, the spacing between vehicles, and the way APCs adjust behind it. If the road narrows near a tree line or crosses an exposed approach to a village, the convoy has fewer choices. It must slow down, hold formation, or risk spreading into mined and watched ground. Artillery becomes most dangerous when the column loses freedom of movement. A shell does not have to land on every vehicle to change the assault. It can hit the road ahead, the side of a crossing point, or the area where the formation is forced to compress. Once the lead vehicle slows, the rest of the group begins to lose timing. A tank may push ahead, an APC may break behind it, and a BMP may drift toward cover without knowing whether that cover is safe. This is where FPV strikes can cut deeper into the formation. A drone may dive into an APC that has stopped for only a few seconds, or it may target a BMP that is separated from the line. One immobilized machine can change the whole assault. The next vehicle cannot simply pass if the road is too narrow. The vehicle behind that one may stop as well, and the column begins to bunch up. What was meant to be a moving armored fist becomes a line of targets waiting under the sky. At that point, artillery has a clearer area to strike, and FPV operators can choose targets with less pressure. The infantry inside the APCs face their own crisis. If they stay inside a damaged vehicle, they risk being hit by a follow-up strike. If they dismount too early, they enter open ground before reaching the position they were supposed to assault. Once they leave the vehicle, they are no longer protected by armor, and FPV drones can keep watching every attempt to move toward cover. The mechanized attack has not failed because tanks and APCs are useless. It fails because their strength depends on timing, route security, and coordination with infantry. When the reconnaissance layer is broken first, the armored force inherits the confusion. From this point, the battle is no longer a straight armored push toward Ukrainian trenches. It becomes a contest between Russian momentum and Ukraine's FPV artillery system. Ukraine does not need to destroy the entire Russian mechanized push in one strike. It breaks the first movement, separates infantry from armor, and keeps every part of the assault under pressure until the attack loses its shape. The first task is to slow the front of the column. If the lead vehicle keeps moving, the vehicles behind it continue to follow the plan. But once the first tank or APC is forced to stop, the whole formation begins to change. Drivers reduce speed, crews look for cover, and infantry inside the vehicles wait for orders that no longer match the situation outside. This is the moment Ukraine tries to create. FPV drones become the main eyes of the battle during this phase. They watch the route, mark where vehicles are gathering, and identify the points where Russian armor has little room to maneuver. A road beside a tree line, a village approach, or a narrow crossing becomes the most dangerous place on the map once FPV operators hold it in view. Artillery then turns that information into pressure. It does not need to hit every vehicle directly. Its job is to make movement harder and force the Russian formation into bad choices. Shells landing near the route stop vehicles from pushing forward, force infantry to dismount early, or push drivers into ground already watched by FPV teams. The FPV strikes arrive at the moments that demand speed and precision. An APC stuck on the road becomes a target before its troops reorganize. A tank turning away exposes its movement to the drone operator. A BMP left behind near a tree line gets hit before its crew understands whether the next threat is coming from the air or from artillery. This sequence attacks the assault from several angles at once. Armor loses timing, infantry loses protection, support vehicles lose safe access to the front. The Russian push still has weapons, but it no longer has a clean rhythm. Once that happens, the battle begins to shift from Russian attack to Ukrainian control. When the Russian force is slowed and divided, Ukraine begins a local counterattack. This does not always look like a large dramatic charge. It often starts with artillery suppressing the area where Russian troops are trying to hold. FPV drones continue to watch the groups that are pulling back, hiding, or trying to bring supplies forward. That constant view helps Ukrainian units decide when the next move is ready. Mechanized infantry then moves in to clear the ground. APCs, or infantry fighting vehicles, bring Ukrainian troops closer to the contested area, while the FPV feed shows where Russian soldiers may still be hiding. The clearing teams move through houses, trenches, shelters, and tree lines because the land itself still has to be controlled by soldiers on the ground. This is an important point in the battle. FPV drones find targets and guide strikes, but they do not hold territory. Artillery breaks a position, but it does not confirm every corner of a village edge. Infantry and mechanized units still have to enter the area, remove the remaining threat, and stop Russian troops from turning a small position into a stronger foothold. The purpose is not only to win one small exchange. Ukraine is trying to stop Russia from building the next assault. By clearing these footholds quickly, Ukraine cuts the chain before it grows. The lesson is bigger than one ambush or one column. This same logic is now shaping the hotter directions of the front, especially around Dnipropetrovsk and Lyman. Lyman and Dnipropetrovsk show that this is no longer only a story about one broken assault. It is becoming a wider lesson about mechanized war under a sky controlled by FPV drones. In Dnipropetrovsk, Russia is trying to turn small gains into larger pressure. A short advance, a tree line, or the edge of a village has value because it gives Moscow something to show on the map. If Russian troops hold even a small foothold, that position becomes a message. It suggests movement, pressure, and a possible new route for the next attack. Ukraine understands why these footholds matter, so it treats them as threats before they become strong points. The response is active defense. FPV teams watch the approach routes, artillery strikes the groups moving forward, and infantry clears the ground before Russian soldiers settle into shelters or trenches. The goal is not only to push one group back, the goal is to stop Russia from building a platform for the next assault. This is why every small position becomes important. A narrow tree line gives infantry cover. A damaged village house gives a squad a place to hide. A roadside shelter gives Russian troops a point to store ammunition or wait for armor. If Ukraine leaves these places alone, they turn into staging areas. If Ukraine clears them quickly, the Russian attack loses the next step in its chain. Around Lyman, the same problem appears on a larger scale. Russia is trying to create pressure from several directions at once. Motorcycle teams scout the routes. Infantry pushes into wooded ground. Tanks bring direct fire. APCs and BMPs carry troops closer to the line. Artillery tries to force Ukrainian defenders to stay low, while crossing points and river approaches become key routes for movement. This sounds powerful on paper, but every layer creates a new burden. More tanks need more fuel. More APCs need safer roads. More infantry needs evacuation routes. More directions of attack require stronger communication. When these parts move together, they create more signals for Ukrainian FPV teams to watch. That is the central weakness of a large mechanized push in this environment. Size brings strength, but it also brings visibility. A single motorcycle team leaves a route pattern. A tank column leaves dust, heat, engine noise, and movement across open ground. An APC group moving toward a village edge shows where infantry may dismount. Once FPV operators see that first movement, Ukraine begins to shape the fight before Russian forces reach the decisive point. The Russian plan is built around speed and pressure. The idea is to push several layers forward, force Ukraine to react everywhere, and find one weak place before the defense can adjust. But Ukraine is trying to do the opposite. It slows every movement, cuts each assault into smaller pieces, and attacks the parts before they connect. If FPV sees the first element, artillery strikes the route. The battle becomes less about one dramatic breakthrough and more about who controls each stage of movement. This is the larger lesson from Dnipropetrovsk and Lyman. Russia is trying to accelerate the war through mechanized pressure, while Ukraine is trying to slow that pressure through FPV observation and artillery timing. The side seen first often loses the right to decide what happens next. So the question now is clear. Will Russia find a better way to protect its mechanized assaults, or will it keep accepting heavy losses because pressure on the front remains more important than the cost of each failed push? From a distance, this battle may look like a simple ambush on a Russian motorcycle group moving through a forest road. But the deeper story is far more serious. Those motorcycles were not just moving alone. They were the first layer of a larger assault chain. The motorcycles searched for a route. Tanks, APCs, and BMPs were meant to turn that route into a real attack. But Ukraine is trying to cut that chain from the beginning. FPV drones detect the route. Snipers break the rhythm of the scouting group. Artillery hits the approach areas. That is why this battle is not only about burned motorcycles or damaged armored vehicles. It points to a bigger change in modern war. Speed and armor is no longer enough if the enemy sees the movement first. In the coming weeks, Russia may continue using motorcycles, tanks, and APCs because it still needs pressure around hot sectors like Dnipropetrovsk and Lyman. But if Ukraine keeps its FPV and artillery network fast enough, every mechanized push may be split apart before it becomes a breakthrough. So the question remains open. Will Russia adapt in time, or is Ukraine turning every major movement into a target from above? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this kind of battlefield analysis helps you understand the war more clearly, like the video, share it, and subscribe to Military Force for more updates on weapons, battles, and the future of modern warfare.